Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I'm super excited to introduce my guest today. We have Diann Wingert, who is a business mindset coach for women who have been successful in corporate, nonprofit, or academic settings, but who struggle as entrepreneurs. After her 20-year career as a licensed psychotherapist, Diann decided to get certified as a coach to shift the conversation from problems to possibilities. She is an expert in the mental health challenges of entrepreneurship for women and has been successfully self-employed since 2010. Hi, Diann. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here with you, Sarah.
So please, can we kick this conversation off with you telling us, how did you end up doing the work that you're doing today?
Absolutely. Well, actually, being a coach is my fourth career. I like to do things for about 10 years, and I happen to have been a psychotherapist for twice that amount. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you are a licensed therapist, and I had a private practice in Los Angeles, you're only licensed for the state that you live in. Now, I worked with a lot of people from the entertainment industry who do a lot of traveling, and they started saying, hey, can we do this on the phone? Can we do this on Skype and so forth? And that's a little bit of a problem, or at least it was at that time. So I sort of got pulled into coaching a little bit because my clients were on the move. And as you know, with psychotherapy, you come to the office, you get a parking spot, you wait in the waiting room, and that have uncomfortable silence. And so it just needed to be shaken up. But what I realized is, as I took my therapy business online, that I really didn't want to be a therapist anymore because it felt confining. And we can talk about why that is if you like, but it really started to feel like I wasn't able to bring all of me into that role. And with therapy, people tend to move towards the future more slowly and at a more cautious pace. And as I got older, I started becoming impatient for people to reach their goals and their dreams much quicker. And that's much more of a coaching role.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because initially for me, it wasn't super clear what the difference was between coaching and therapy because there is just so much overlap. But I think that distinction does make it really clear from, now I can definitely see that resonates, that coaching is very future focused and therapy is generally more past focused. So it's really valuable when, you do really have some things to sort through or some complex issues to come to you, a clearer perspective on in order to inform your capacity to move forward. Sometimes we do need to go there and, look at some things. But I think the combination of the two is super powerful because in my experience, in facing forward and really focusing on where we want to go, whatever needs to be sorted out will come up for us. Like whatever problems are there that need to be ironed up are going to present themselves. And then you can, get therapeutic support with that as and when needed. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Sarah. But I think that for me, the cautionary tale is this. Most coaches do not have a mental health background. And mental health services, therapy is still stigmatizing. So many people will hire a coach when they actually need a therapist. They just don't want one because of the stigma. And if a coach doesn't have any mental health training, they may be actually attempting to do therapeutic work without realizing it is outside their scope. You add the fact that coaching is an unregulated industry. I think there's always the potential for harm for people who hire a coach, need a therapist. The coach doesn't realize that they're attempting to do therapy without the training. And people can actually be harmed because you and I both know as coaches, what do we make it mean when a client doesn't move forward? Well, I personally have worked with coaches who, if I wasn't moving forward for one reason or another, they said, you're not committed, you're not all in, you're not taking massive action. And that's very blaming and shaming. If a person has a trauma history, that's going to mess them up. So I think the distinction is important. And I believe over time, it's going to become more clear. There'll probably be some sort of regulations at some point to protect people from being harmed. But I think for the most part, you can think of therapy as more for healing and coaching is more for growth. And I am all about the growth and reaching your goals because most of us have goals that we haven't reached yet. I know I do.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And you can see the kind of like the areas of coaching where there tends to be crossovers when you start to bring in like inner child healing work. And, there's a lot of forgiveness work, particularly in like the money mindset journey, which is such a big part of entrepreneurship. And, just realizing how much of our behavior and our results, particularly around money, so often stems from our conditioning in our childhood. And yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that. Most of my clients I recommend to work with therapists at the same time, because anytime you're moving into growth, you just stuff comes up.
Stuff
Right?
comes up. I always think of it as like, you're always digging up something from the past, even if you don't have a shovel in your hands. This is what growth does to us. You know it, and I know it. Whenever we are engaged in a growth process, we are attempting to leave our comfort zone and move towards a different level of functioning, a different level of consciousness. Of course, your ego and your brain is going to try to hold you in place. So it's going to throw whatever it has to throw at you. And most of us are where we are and not further ahead because of limiting beliefs and other things, that come from our distant past that we don't even realize are holding us back.
Yeah, so I'm super interested as somebody who's had experience, extensive experience as a therapist and also as a coach. Um, Particularly in that transition, because I know a lot of coaches come from mental health backgrounds, because coaches are just, innate healers, naturally very compassionate, with a real desire to make an impact and, help people transform and improve their lives. But the way that psychotherapy and therapy is very, systematized, centered around like certifications and certain legislation, and it's very organized and controlled. And coaching is kind of the opposite, because it's a relatively new industry, and there's a lot of I see, particularly with clients and other coach friends, navigating that shift in terms of, well, I'm moving to help people in a different way. But obviously, you have all of the frameworks and the tools and the processes and all of the experience that you've had in therapeutically treating people. Like, how did you start to integrate that knowledge into a new practice and kind of step into this new framework, which doesn't really have any rules, and in terms of like the amount of freedom and what you're focusing on, and which tools and which ways you're supporting people? And I guess, like what were some of the main shifts in your practice, particularly around supporting people as a therapist, as a coach who is also trained as a therapist?
It's a really astute question. Thank you for asking. I think in the beginning, because it's about 6 years now since I started transitioning over, one of the reasons, and I don't know if I made that clear enough earlier, is we decided to move from Los Angeles to Oregon. The moment I left the state, my therapy credentials were no longer active. So I was either going to have to get relicensed as a therapist in the new state or do something different. And by that point in time, I had realized that I didn't really want to do the very slow, methodical work of helping people heal. By that point, I kind of felt like a lot of the people I was seeing were holding themselves back from growth because of their attachment to the past and what they believed it means about them. And for those who were able to sort of release their grip and move forward, some of those clients were actually able to transition from therapy clients to coaching clients. But what it also required of me was several things that I think are critical. One, trained as a therapist, I had the mindset that the client is fragile, that the client has challenges and struggles, that they needed help to return to their former level of functioning. So I have a very strong, very direct, and pretty dominant personality. You've already picked that up a little bit. And so I was always more eager for the person to move forward as quickly as they could. But with therapy, you really do have to go at the pace the client is. People are fearful of change by nature. few of us are, love change, but most people resist it and avoid it. So if you're always going at the client's pace, you are always going at the pace of fear. And that started to feel very uncomfortable for me. And it just seemed like it took people much, much longer to move forward. And I think the longer that you stay in an impaired state, the more that becomes your identity and your destination. So some of the things I had to change were the way I viewed people, as instead of impaired or limited or challenged or fragile, I had to see them as complete and whole, lacking nothing, and maybe just in need of guidance and sometimes challenging. And let me give you a specific example. A lot of people, because they know I have a therapy background, they feel very safe hiring me as a business coach because they know I've got a ton of education and training and that I've been regulated. So I'm not some maverick who's out there just winging it, But oftentimes they will try to pull the conversation into what may sound like a therapeutic role. So they'll start saying, well, let me give you some context. And I'll say, not necessary. But I just need to give you some of the facts. They're far more important in your mind than they are in reality. Let's just move forward. But, and I'm like, tell you what, I'm just going to go on a big hunch here. You've probably already been thinking about these reasons that you think you're stuck long enough. Why don't we just create some momentum and see what happens? Now, for people that are like, like what just happened, we proceed. But sometimes people are like, well, wait a minute, you don't want to know about the past and you don't want to know how I got here? It's like, I know you're stuck and I know how to get you moving forward. I think that's what we need to do. So it's maybe a subtle thing, maybe even feels a little provocative, but for the person who's actually ready for growth, they may not even realize it could be as simple as accepting an invitation to move the conversation forward instead of referencing the past for context. The only thing that the past is a context for is the past. If we are still talking about it in the present, we are treating it as a present circumstance, and it isn't. So that's kind of one important thing. And I think also with therapy, you're literally making it up as you go along. And what I mean by that is therapy proceeds one session at a time. In reality, I didn't even know this, but 50% of people drop out of therapy after a single session. I didn't know that because I worked with people over long periods of time. But because of that, you never know what your session could be your last. So you kind of treat it as a single entity, sort of if you would think of a one-off coaching conversation. But with coaching the way I do it now, there is always a goal. We are always measuring our progress towards that goal and addressing whatever obstacles are standing in the way of creating that forward momentum. So therapy kind of always felt sort of, how do you know when you're done? But with coaching, you should know, at least the way I do it, exactly where you are, exactly how much progress you made, and where we're going next. So it feels to me much more forward focused, much more purposeful, and much more targeted as opposed to, sort of just developing more insight. Listen, insight is great and necessary, but it's not enough to get people moving forward. You got to take action. And that's where the action is. When people start taking action instead of just talking about it or thinking about it, that's when you really see what you're dealing with. With therapy, talk, talk, talk. And at some point, I didn't want to listen anymore because I felt like I was helping them stay where they were, not where they wanted to be. But I really did have to make other adjustments too. Sarah, for example, when you're a therapist, you're legally responsible for the people that are currently working with you. Legally meaning if someone becomes suicidal, I'm legally responsible for keeping them safe. If they are involved in, addictive behavior or they're abusing someone or being abused, I was legally mandated to report that and address that. With coaching, it's the wild, wild west. There's so much openness. There's so much freedom that at first I really didn't want to take advantage of any of that because I was sort of indoctrinated into that role of being under those constraints. But once I got the hang of it, one of the first things I loosened up on was how direct I am. I always felt I needed to restrain that with therapy clients. Now I am very direct. And the people who choose to work with me really appreciate it because I get to the root of things quickly. The other thing is I swear a lot in my personal life. And I always had to keep that under covers as a professional. But now if you have a problem with the F-bomb, we probably aren't going to work together. I can't guarantee you're not going to hear a lot of them.
I love that. It sounds like you're having so much fun as a
I
therapist.
am. I'm having way more fun. I'm having more fun. I can move at my own pace. I can bring all of my personality to the table, which is ridiculously insightful, very direct, humorous, and sarcastic. I couldn't do that as a therapist. It just wasn't appropriate.
Okay. I have another question brewing for you. And let's see how this is going to come out. Okay. You're talking about, and I agree, this is coaching, is like having a clear, measurable goal and being able to measure your progress and being able to attain the goal. And then obviously the growth and the journey that happens on the way to the goal. What's your perspective on like emotional goals? Because I don't know if you're familiar with Danielle Laporte's The Desire Map. I think it originally came from her idea of just, like leading with how you want to feel. And then, practicing, creating new neural pathways and prioritizing activities and habits that allow us to embody our desired states more than the undesired states. Like, what's your perspective on kind of like goal setting around emotional states with just, like being a human and being able to experience the full range of human emotions and around, because I think one thing that a lot of, I've definitely struggled with, I know a lot of people in the coaching world struggle with, is just judgment around the way that we feel, right? Particularly with this whole conversation around manifestation, and when you're a high vibration, when you're embodying, the feeling good states, then you're more magnetic to the things that you desire, you're more productive to take action on your goals, and all of this. These types of narratives lead to, a lot of resistance with some of the human experience that's really just inevitable, and, the more challenging emotions that we navigate through as humans. So I'm curious, like, what your perspective on this conversation is.
Yeah, I love it. I would say, if you want to divide, and this is very binary thinking, very general thinking, but if you want to say on the one side, you've got science, and on the other side, you've got woo-woo, I'd say I'm about one woo. So I'm not woo-woo and I'm not anti-woo. I'm about one in and one on the other side. I studied neuroscience extensively as part of my training and also just my own personal growth. I've been a practicing Buddhist for the last 15 years. So that's all very much, the power of the mind and all that. I would say on the manifestation conversation, here's where things get interesting, because I have known a lot of people who are heavily into manifestation and raising their vibration and dealing with chakras and vision boarding and all of that, but then they don't take action. So it's like they want to magnetize all the things that they're interested in. Like, you can order from Amazon Prime and just wait for the doorbell. But I think it's the changes that we actually do create in our brain through intentional, conscious thinking and emotion that allows us to take empowered action towards our goal. So I think on the one hand, there's just sort of magnetizing things and waiting for them to arrive. And when they don't, you think there's something wrong with the way you're doing it. Nope, it's not enough. And on the other hand, just changing your mindset and your emotional state without taking action more in the scientific realm, that doesn't do anything either. I think it goes back to what I said earlier about doing therapeutic work. Therapeutic work is necessary when you require healing. But once you're healed, you probably have a lot of scar tissue, but you are healed, then you can grow. But when you're trying to grow and you're still in an active state of unhealing, you're going to keep falling back as you're trying to move forward. So I think it's always whether you are thinking of raising your vibration by intentionally changing your thoughts from a quantum physics perspective, from a Buddhist mindfulness meditation perspective, or from a manifestation and abundance perspective. All of them work, all of them are legitimate, and all of them must be coupled with intentional action, or nothing can happen. Nothing can happen. You can change your mind, but if you're not taking action with that changed mind, how will you know? What will be different? You may feel better, but you won't necessarily function better, nor will you you won't cause different conditions to happen in your life. It's one of the things I think is so interesting about the Buddhist perspective is a lot of people who know a little bit about it think, for example, karma is like reward and punishment. No, karma is causes and conditions. And that's very similar to manifestation and abundance, isn't it? It's we cause conditions to arise based on our thinking and our actions. Someone's coming to the party?
No, that was my abundance alarm. Sorry.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect
timing.
And yeah.
I'm curious what your reaction to that is. I mean, do you think that you can manifest changes in your life without coupling them with action?
I mean, okay, I think action is always I think action also is a tool to shift your mindset and your belief.
Agreed.
So I think
you can do it either way. You can shift your mindset and then take action with the shifted mindset, or you can take the action, which will then require you to shift your mindset in order to maintain that changed action.
Right. Because I think it's really a question of alignment. And alignment is, like when your mind and your emotions and your actions and your beliefs line up with what it is that is a true desire for you. And I think that because, and I've worked with clients, because I work a lot with marketing and with messaging. And I've had a lot of clients who immediately, as soon as they have the clarity around what it is that they're offering, who they're most excited to serve, and they have that alignment, and I've had that experience with myself too, clients start to show up before they've even started marketing. So before they've even started telling people about it, because, obviously they've done that work to get the clarity so they can identify a client when they show up and they know what to say to them. So there is still a level of action happening. So, I think when you find that alignment with your perspective, with your outlook, with your beliefs, you can create that kind of really magical magnetism that just where the things that you desire that are a good fit for you and right for you just start to show up as if by magic. But I mean, I think even doing the mindset work is an action, aligning your emotions is an action. And I think the fastest way to shift your belief and your mindset and your emotions is to take action. And through the growth that happens when we start, acting differently. Because if you think about it, we're acting all day, and non-action is still an action. So
I would say what action are you taking? Is it intentional action, reaction, or non-action? I mean, there's no such thing as, resting or plateauing. No, you're growing or you're stagnating. We are part of nature. There are only two states in nature, growth and decay. Nobody likes to think of themselves decaying, but, it may not be visible on the outside, but things can be changing on the inside. That's why sometimes you'll hear, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, someone will just say something that sounds like an elevated version of themselves. And where did that come from? Well, you've been working that on the inside, and sometimes it'll just come out all at once as opposed to gradually. And I think it's always fun to be part of that when it happens.
Yeah. And I think for me, what seems to be true is in growing my capacity to be present with all of my emotions, it grows my capacity to just create and to be present with life and to, I guess, stretch myself to get.
You're not resisting anything,
right? And that involves going through being very triggered, or, you know, going through very uncomfortable patterns as I like release and as I purge them and as I attract situations into my life that trigger me, in order to feel emotions that, you know, I've resisted feeling before. I felt I was incapable of feeling before, or didn't have the tools to navigate like an understanding of before. And I think that's why it's, as a culture, we really resist feeling the full spectrum of our emotions, because it's so illogical, in contrast to the frameworks through which we're so comfortable kind of like seeing and digesting the world. And yeah, I feel like we're in that's just like the big kind of awakening moment that we're in, is kind of building this greater emotional intelligence to be able to experience more of who we are.
Well, I think you mentioned earlier that that's really where our creativity comes from. I love working with creative people who often tend to be very sensitive. And people that are sensitive need to be aware of what level of sensitivity they have, what level of reactivity they have, and how hardy they are. Some people are so sensitive and so reactive that they're not very hardy. When they get triggered, they go down, they stay down. And it takes a long time and a lot of effort for them to come back up. Knowing that about yourself, and how to not only create those improved conditions within yourself and create greater resiliency, which I think is also what we're talking about, but also something I call environmental engineering. Like, while you are in the process of increasing your capacity and developing your resiliency, there may be people and situations that you need to avoid until you're at that new level, especially really, really sensitive people. They can't just partake of everything. I think of them as the orchids, not the daisies. Daisies can grow anywhere. They're basically weeds. Orchids need special handling.
That's amazing. I love this conversation. What would you say is like the main message on your heart that you wish more of your people in your community and your client base knew?
I think one of the things I find myself sharing with just about everyone, even in my personal life, is a much better understanding of what it actually means to be a creative. Because most people who are creative, they understand that they're also sensitive, but they don't necessarily always appreciate that that is actually a gift. I have two highly sensitive, highly creative children. And when I was raising them, I think I was a little bit of blunt force trauma to those kids because of my boldness, my directness. I was completely intimidating to my daughter and didn't even realize it. What I've learned since about creativity and sensitivity has given me such a deep appreciation for these people, because creatives are literally the canaries in the coal mine. They, being the most sensitive among us, are the ones who show us what is changing in our environment and what we need to pay attention to, which is also where the opportunities are. So we need them. They're very, very important. They are the visionaries that allow humanity to evolve and move forward. It's where much of entrepreneurship comes from. And I wish I understood that years earlier. And I wish creative, sensitive people understood that their sensitivity is a gift. You do need to manage it, and in some cases protect it, but it is where so much of your creativity comes from. And it's a wonderful thing.
Oh, I love that message so much. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your wisdom with us today on the show. Please tell everyone who's listening, what have you got going on? Where can people find you and follow your work?
I would love to have people check out my podcast, which is The Driven Woman, and it is intended for ambitious female entrepreneurs who are falling short of their goals. So that's The Driven Woman podcast. And you can follow me on Instagram at Coach Diann Wingert. And Diann has a little bit of a funky spelling. It's Diann.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Please leave us a review so more people can find the show. And I'll see you next week. Thanks, Diann.
Bye now.
Bye. For more inspirational content, head over to my website withsarahmac.com, and please support the show by liking, commenting, and subscribing.